Hey guys, this isn't really a PlayStation related video, but I was fortunate enough to get early access to the Warfare Legacy Collection, and I'm a huge fan of this series and this developer, so I'm making a review about it, whether it makes sense or not. Sometimes you just gotta shake things up, and there's just too many good games out there to just restrict myself to one platform all the time. But consider that your heads up that this game is only on PC, and let's get into it. The Warfare Legacy Collection is a new Unity-based port of the classic online Flash games from Con Artist Games, with additional work on this new version from the Electric Toy Company. The originals were published by Armor Games back in 2008 and 2009, and Con Artist Games has also developed the Last Stand zombie games or the early Crush the Castle games, if you remember those. Of course, these games were also available on other websites like Newgrounds and Congregate. These games really stood out to me back in the day because of their fairly mature subject matter among the Flash game space, and their very realistic graphical style and simple yet satisfying gameplay loops. You can actually still play the original Warfare games thanks to the Ruffle engine, which allows Flash programs to be emulated in modern browsers despite the original software dropping support in 2017. In fact, I actually replayed the original two games just prior to booting up this Legacy Collection just to see how they've aged. So I'd like to talk about the originals a bit first and use that as a baseline to compare this new Legacy Collection to the source material. Unfortunately, I never had a chance to play the short-lived Warfare Online game that was available on Windows for a short time because I just didn't have a PC at the time. So I can't talk about that, but the gameplay I have seen looks really cool, and I wish I had an opportunity to play that game when it was active. The core gameplay of this series is a very simple RTS game that they call a tug-of-war type game. You deploy various classes of troops into distinct lanes that have limited cover or trenches, and there's no backtracking and no switching lanes. It makes it a very comprehensible strategy game, and in later levels becomes quite challenging, deciding what troops to deploy for maximum effectiveness and forward momentum. Balancing these decisions with the morale bar that goes up or down depending on your success in each rock, paper, scissors type conflict between squads, and the limited deployment resources is a fun juggling act to get into. Both of the original games were about 30 minutes to beat their campaign once. I beat each failing only once, and you usually get to choose between the Western Allies campaign or the Axis campaign, which are mostly just mirrors of one another, and the Axis campaign is typically the harder or New Game Plus type campaign that you'd want to play on your second go around. The original Warfare 1917 entry, in hindsight, is a bit of an outlier amongst its sequels because it's a single plane of action, whereas in later entries you can actually choose to deploy units in 3 different tracks or lanes for more complex strategies. I think it sets you up well for the increased complexity as you get deeper into the series, and the World War I setting also makes it really feel appropriately like an endless standoff or stalemate, and in most cases the only way forward is through strategies that involve a lot of brute force, missile barrages, and always high casualties. As I alluded to, the graphics in these games are very realistic stylistically, especially for a 2000s Flash game. It's really quite graphic, and there's mustard gas, mortars blowing soldiers apart, and the sound design and the presentation is really authentic feeling, and unfortunately there's no way to get through these battles without a lot of soldiers dying. In going back to this original game though, you can really see why a remaster was necessary, because unlike a lot of Flash games that used mostly vector graphics that can upscale easily, these games use a lot of realistic bitmap textures and photo reference that are stuck at a very low resolution and don't blow up particularly well. Pretty much everything except the soldiers is not scalable, and I don't remember being able to play these games in full screen. I think that's a new feature from the Ruffle emulator, but that definitely doesn't help their case. Like many early 2000s games, I think these would look a lot better on a CRT. Even in full screen, they'd probably look great still. Warfare 1944 added a more complex 3-lane system that allows for more interesting flanking strategies, limited range and visibility, and more tough decisions. The presentation is largely the same, though there's a lot more level variety in the battlefields compared to the no man's land of World War I, and I also feel like this game was a lot more balanced overall. I found it more worthwhile and necessary to try different strategies compared to the pure cannon fodder and brute force approach of the first game. It wasn't necessarily harder, but just more varied and fun, and less a literal tug-of-war match. One thing in particular I didn't like is the specific grenade or airborne abilities you had to activate by clicking a specific soldier, as opposed to the quick bar and automated grenade throws available in the first game. This felt a little bit too in-depth compared to the rest of the game and the controls that were given to you, and also considering that other features like locking cover or stockpiling multiple squads in one cover were no longer available in this sequel. In some cases, I wasn't even able to select the particular commander I needed for airstrikes if he was in a big clump of other unit types. But beyond some of these gameplay nitpicks, it's a really great sequel, and both games are just top tier among the Flash game community. Both games also have custom game modes in addition to the double-sided campaigns, so there was just a lot of replay value in these games. But let's move on to this Legacy Collection now and see what's changed. The game still works in 2D like the originals, but it looks like the assets were created in a 3D software this time around. So some of the charm of the original is lost in this art style change, I think, but I'm sure this is a much more efficient way to create a game like this nowadays compared to stitching together big 2D photo references. I will say that the soldiers stand out even more than in the original games, and they look very cartoony at this resolution, and while the levels themselves are maybe less on the realistic side, I would say the gap between the world and the soldiers art style is larger in this Legacy Collection than it was in the originals. It doesn't feel as gritty or realistic generally. I do have to give props to the heavily increased particle and environmental effects though. When certain battles get really long and more crazy, the amount of visual chaos on screen definitely reflects that better than the classics do. The UI is all redone, but overall has the same style and layout. The progress and morale bars along the top are slightly different, which was a surprise to me considering how important they are and how much you look at them. I don't know what it is about them, but they just look like some very Unity engine looking bars, if you know what I mean. Also, the left bar is just not aligned ever so slightly. Some very small things in a very important gameplay feature that just stood out to me. Performance is great. I doubt any computer is going to have trouble running this game. I didn't check the FPS I was getting, but it's an easy 4K 60 or higher with all the footage that I captured. There's not a whole lot of graphical options either, so I doubt they're very necessary. For reference, the originals feel like they're animated at 30 FPS during gameplay, so this new one is as smooth as butter when you switch into it. Besides the visual presentation changes, a lot of, if not all, the audio has been redone or improved. The sound effects and general atmosphere sounds are really great and have a lot more range now. I don't know if Flash games had an overall size limit or audio bitrate limitations, but those are definitely all gone with this new entry. There's also new voice acting in between campaign missions that makes the mission screens feel more alive and just ups the production value across the board.
The stretch of open ground beyond our trench should lead to a swift victory.
The game speed and general feel is very much the same and familiar. Just based on my playtime, I think the game speed might be a few milliseconds slower overall, just because the new campaign was about 40 minutes for me instead of the 30 minutes with the Flash versions. It's also maybe just a touch more difficult. I died once in each of the Flash campaigns, but died 2 to 5 times in the Legacy Collection versions, which I played immediately after refreshing myself on the originals. Something that also stood out to me was that there was still no restart battle button. I think that would have been a nice quality of life feature to add, especially on the new Battle of the Bulge levels, which I'll talk about shortly, because they are quite a bit lengthier, taking from 5 to 10 minutes instead of the 2 to 5 of the original campaign levels. It's a bit annoying when the morale bar is down to the wire and you have to wait for the enemy's last soldier to pass your edge of the screen or quit to the main menu just to reload the battle. Perhaps it's a result of both games using the same new modern engine or something for why they feel a bit harder, but overall they are the same games, same levels, units, progression, strategies. This is easily the best way to play the Warfare games. And here's hoping that maybe one day we'll get an offline version of Warfare Online and I can finally get a chance to check that out. Lastly, I want to talk about the new campaign that's exclusive to the Legacy Collection, the Battle of the Bulge. This is an awesome campaign that really feels like the developers are taking the best mechanics of both entries to make a very gameplay-driven experience. There's way more open-ended level design, unique objectives, and a lot of shuffling of the available units across much larger levels in this campaign. The levels are 3-lane style like the 1944 campaign, but they have a mix of cover and trenches for the first time, and they're also split into multiple horizontal sections, so the battles feel much longer and require a lot more forward thinking than just brute forcing a huge army to pass the edge of the screen. Almost every horizontal section has different challenges and requires a new strategy of deployment and positioning, and it honestly feels like a new third game in the series. The highs and lows of this campaign are much greater and much more exciting than any of the classic levels because of these varied objectives, doing a better job of switching between some of the series' toughest challenges and really fun Power Fantasy style events. It took me over an hour to complete the first mirror of this campaign, and I failed many more times compared to the classic entries. It's much harder, it's more varied, it requires more strategy than ever. Honestly, I would recommend this collection just for this new campaign, though I think you should really replay the first 2 games to get up to speed, as is recommended in the main menu. So wrapping it all up, the Warfare Legacy Collection is a very solid remaster of these 2 classic Flash RTS games, bringing them up to modern standards with redone graphics and audio. And while the new art style might not be my preference in fully capturing the gritty realism of the originals, the updated presentation and the addition of the Battle of the Bulge campaign provides a very worthwhile experience for both longtime fans like me and any potential newcomers. So definitely check this out if you are a fan of the classics or you're just a fan of straightforward single-player RTS games. I'll also put separate uploads of my full playthrough of each game and remastered campaign in 4K resolution if you'd like to check those out in the description. And thanks for watching. If you made it this far, like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And let me know down below if you actually remember playing these games back in the day.